So hi everyone. So we are at the cross-chain product panel for our LongHash multi-chain infrastructure summit, and basically today we'll be discussing native cross-chain applications because for this panel we are introducing our thesis that we believe that like native cross-chain products will represent the future of Web3 applications, and because native web cross-chain applications will be more successful than the traditional applications which will operate on the single chains. So yeah, I think we can kick it off with a self-intro on all of our panelists. Yeah, so I think maybe Richard, you can go first.
Cool, yeah, let me start. I'm Richard. I'm the technical founder of the Safe project. We are working on a smart contract-based wallet, or in particular also account abstraction. That is, like, we believe that account abstraction is required to unlock real ownership on blockchain and also bridge the gap that still in the UX and like certain security aspects still exist. And obviously, when thinking about account abstraction, multi-chain is a big part, right? Like, how does account abstraction, how do smart contract wallets behave between different chains? And it's a lot more special than it comes into an EOA. So since we believe in that account abstraction is a way towards the future to get mass adoption for blockchains, then this is one of the very essential parts to figure out how does it work together to bring this really to the masses.
Yeah, thank you very much. Philip, I think you can go next.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Philipp. I'm the co-founder and CEO of LI.FI. We are the most advanced bridge aggregation protocol on the market. We try to aggregate as many different solutions as possible. And we believe that abstraction, as well as account exception, just the abstraction of liquidity flow will play a major role in building multi-chain applications. In the future, dApps like multi-chain dApps will function like on-chain or single-chain dApps, so the user won't recognize which chain he's on. And simply, we believe that dApps going to pick blockchains like developers pick databases today, so based on the technical needs. And that's what we are working on. We're 40 people by now. And yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Sunny?
Hey, my name is Sunny. I work on the Cosmos ecosystem for the past 5 or 6 years. It's an ecosystem that's, multi-chain, interchain native first. Our entire premise is that, like, there doesn't need to be one blockchain for everything, and generalized blockchains are a little bit of a misdesign. And really, what we want is a world of application-specific blockchains that can all still communicate and interact with each other. And so, past year and a half, I've been working on a project called Osmosis, which is a DEX built as its own blockchain using the Cosmos stack. And so, yeah, really focus on building a interchain native DEX.
I think my background is like scaling based. Like for the last 3 years, I've been working on like the scaling problem in general. Was part of the initial team at Polygon, built one of the first ZK rollup systems, built the fastest optimistic rollup at the Ethereum Foundation. And right now I work as the co-founder. Okay. And the basis of rollup for us is to solve for scaling, because we believe in order to solve scaling, we need to like rollup centric future is and like, rollup and basic future, and we need to work on asynchronous communication protocols that enable developers to create these like unified applications that enhance like user experience for users, such that they don't have to use Aave on Polygon, they can use just Aave.
So yeah, thank you very much for your introduction. So going straight into the first question here, after I given the brief intro on cross-chain itself. So what are the main pain points in Web3 that we think that cross-chain products can solve for right now? Yeah. So
I can go.
Okay.
Get it start. Like, so one of the main things that I see that like why this whole app chain model, is something we really believe in. I mean, there's actually a number of reasons, right? So one is one of the most easy, simple reasons is just for scalability purposes, right? When you have a blockchain that is a generalized blockchain, what always happens is you end up competing for throughput with other applications that are on the same chain, and you might be trying to provide a certain level of service to your users, but then suddenly, I don't know, an NFT drop happens on the same blockchain that you're on, and suddenly the gas prices spike, and you sort of have no control over that. When you have an application specific blockchain, you're sort of the only application on your blockchain. You don't have to worry about another application coming in and suddenly just eating up all of the throughput of your chain. So that's one of the most obvious reasons. And so but beyond that, there's also a lot of cool stuff you can do as a developer. When you're building on something like Ethereum or any generalized blockchain, you're really at the mercy of the L1 developers on what you're able to do. And especially if you're trying to really push the limit on what you can do with blockchains today. For us, we really believe that the next frontier is doing interesting stuff with privacy. You can do interesting, MEV mitigation and capture strategies. But a lot of this stuff needs to be done with innovations at the blockchain layer. And so what building these app chains let you do is get this level of vertical integration that you won't get otherwise. Other applications that are built on existing L1s might be able to, they control their smart contracts, but with something like Osmosis, we control the application and the blockchain itself. And we also actually build the primary wallet for the Cosmos ecosystem. But so by having this sort of full stack control, we can do stuff experiment with novel cryptography, do things like build in batching systems natively into the blockchain itself, all sorts of cool things that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. But then we're still able to interact with the rest of the Cosmos, but even the larger blockchain ecosystem using bridges like Axelar, and still bring in these assets and allow them to be tradable very seamlessly on the Osmosis stacks.
Definitely. I see the appeal of Osmosis having its own DEX and having its sovereignty, so that it's free to experiment with new features as well. Yeah. So maybe we can move on to LI.FI socket, which are the middleware, hoping to ease some of the problems for the users.
Yeah, I think ultimately these cross-chain products right now, they are facing a particular challenge, which is an information gap, right? The user is multi-chain, has information assets and an identity on multiple chains. And this information gap has to be bridged in multiple ways. And so we have a variety of bridges that solve for different cases. We have liquidity networks to move assets. We have arbitrary data messaging bridges, mostly underneath these liquidity networks, that can also send all sort of data. Essentially, all these bridges kind of have the same fundamental, but then again, they focus on different features. And then we have a new breed of bridges that simply allow to share state proofs and do that in a very specific way, like state proofs across multiple chains at the same time, for example. So again, another type of bridges focusing on different features. As an aggregator like LI.FI or Socket, we aggregate these bridges and we make sure that the developer doesn't have to make a choice here, because for the developer, it's so much research overhead. Just shortening that go-to-market is a huge value add for him, right? So we make sure that that they don't have to choose which bridge to use specifically. These bridges support different source and destination chains for whatever they are offering. And all of that adds so much overhead. As a developer, you want to focus on your own business. That's what cross-chain products have to solve for, and we are an integral part in the process.
Yeah, I think definitely agree to what Philipp just mentioned, that I think we at Socket also believe that for asset bridging particularly, aggregation provides a very nice middleware that's not only just good UX, but almost essential, right? And that's just because how bridges work, right? So if we talk about Aave, if someone deposits 10 million USDC on Aave, that 10 million USDC is available for everyone to use, right? But if a bridge has 10 million TVL, that's distributed across 10 chains, that's 1 million per chain, right? So that kind of creates bridge liquidity for a very small amount of assets, but users want a larger asset support. So I think aggregation is the right kind of middleware for any kind of developer. And on top of that, Socket also has a messaging layer that adds composability to these asset transfers, right? So that users can bridge their assets via the most efficient route, and then kind of use the messaging solution to perform actions on the destination chain and stuff like that. So I think it just enhances the overall UX for the developer and for the user, and I think this is like quite neat in the space right now.
Yeah, definitely. Like I feel the appeal of for both the users and the developers, like of simplifying the cross-chain experience. So yeah, what about Richard? Like I know that like Gnosis Safe is also deployed on multiple chains, and would like to hear on views on like what you guys are working on with the account abstraction as well.
Yeah, I mean, first I would also like really what Sunny said, right? Like with the advantage of multi-chains is right, like that you have different purpose, but also different trust models, right? Like, I mean, for some cases like gaming, you might not need hundreds of thousand validators validating your gaming set. Like you can use other trust models and use L1 as a rollback. I think what we see that to really facilitate these advantages also for the user, they should not be visible to the user. And this is where then for the safe, it becomes a little bit tricky, because if you have account abstraction, it's like there are quite a vast amount of challenges when it comes to like, because users have certain assumptions right now that about addresses, how to use addresses. And I mean, that's very interesting how Sunny described it, right? Like if you have full control over the whole stack, you can abstract away some of these things more easily, but then also you are kind of setting a certain framework. And I think this is for us with account abstraction, the question, okay, how can we make use of this to introduce a standard where you can also have this cross-chain and align cross-chain on certain rules so that you can transport it to some extent. Yeah, and I think also long-term, the question is like also how can be tools like arbitrary message bridges be used to really use it for the account standard across. Right now the examples are, hey, we have exchanges, we have lending protocols where we use aggregation across chains, but we are not like, I think the next step would be, okay, how can we use like arbitrary message bridges to have one account on one chain and control multiple accounts on different chains, right? Like, and this is not trivial, because currently users always think it's on an address base, but obviously that's a difference. So there's a high potential, and I mean they have been outlined by all of the different people here, right? Like with multi-chain, but yeah, it's still quite tricky, and the users should not have to think about it. Which chain are they on? What is the purpose of this chain, right? Like this is, I mean, as Philipp said, we don't even want the developers to think about it, even less the user, right? Like so, this is, I think, one of the parts where we still have to do quite some research.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for your answers. So yeah, before moving into the second question, basically like we've been working on like a model to sort of like frame the different types of cross-chain products that will be out there. So I've been working on this model with my team at LongHash Ventures, and basically we have 3 archetypes that we have identified. So the first archetype is the distributed model. So basically the liquidity and the assets are distributed on multiple blockchains. However, there will be like a single coordinating chain or a coordinating like off-chain protocol, which will use message passing or like any other smart contract interaction to coordinate the different liquidity functions of each of the liquidity on the different chains. So something like LI.FI and Socket, they are utilizing the existing liquidity on the DEXs and bridges. So they are using their own infrastructure to enable more seamless swaps of that. And of course, we are also seeing like something that Delphi Digital recently wrote about, the SLAMM model, where the liquidity is fragmented across all the different chains, and then this coordinating chain will basically view them as like virtual liquidity. So the virtual AMM can basically swap assets with very low slippage between the different chains as well. And of course, like we're seeing like Gnosis Safe, which is a distributed model in our opinion, because we think that like it's basically the copy pasting the smart contracts on Ethereum onto the different chains. However, for their governance, they can still decide to see like if it'll be centralized on Ethereum or if that will be distributed as well. And yeah, the other archetype that we've identified is, of course, the aggregator model. So that's where something like Osmosis comes in. We think that in Cosmos, Osmosis is the main chain that aggregates all the existing liquidity from all the different assets in Osmos, and also like all the native bridged assets as well. So basically, they are aggregating all the liquidity into a single chain to enable like more capital efficiency, and maybe in the future like different protocols can take advantage of that as well. And of course, like we've also seen like dedicated NFT chains like Engine and IMX, which are starting to come out to basically dedicate all the throughput to just processing NFTs. So this is the aggregation model that we see. And yeah, another like this is the final archetype that we've identified. It's a very new product idea. Like we haven't seen a lot of products building on it yet. It's basically like the unbundled product. So basically, each of the dApp will have different aspects on each chain. So Sommelier on Cosmos is building something like this. So basically, all the yield calculations and yield strategies are handled by on the Cosmos chain. However, when implementing the strategies themselves, the assets are all around Ethereum. So basically, they're utilizing the sovereign chains of Cosmos to enable all of this aggregation and calculations, but using the liquidity of Ethereum to execute the yield calculations. And of course, we've also like talked to like several NFT projects which are building like their own gamified auctions on a faster chain like Polygon. However, the NFTs that they're bidding on are actually on Ethereum. So they're actually using bridge versions of the NFTs on Polygon. And if the bid is successfully captured on Polygon, they will allow the user to claim back the original NFT on Ethereum. So basically, like they're utilizing multi-chain in order to split the load of the calculations onto a cheaper chain. So yeah, going into our question, basically, I just want to understand like what you guys think are going to be useful to have like distributed or like aggregated, and like what you think can be like done on a like modular basis. The different things that we can think about are, of course, like the main thing is liquidity, which can be distributed, of course, to different chains. And we're also seeing like governance, which hasn't really been distributed yet. It's more like aggregated right now. All the major protocols, they have the governance on a single chain. And of course, like what do you think? Like the coordination of different assets. Do you think that will also be vital in this this new cross-chain model?
I think a pretty solid question, and just to kind of kick things off here, I think my personal mental model when thinking about cross-chain stuff is basically think about APIs that are like 1,000,000 times slower and costs 1,000,000 times more, right? And that's basically the current cross-chain infrastructure, right? And on top of that, you add all of the security problems that come along that kind of increase the complexity to another like 100x level, right? But that's broadly the mental model around which I kind of think about these things. And it's kind of interesting to note that if like messaging or bridging kind of evolves to a level where things take like a cross-chain transfer takes as long as it takes to make an API call today, the topology of applications will kind of change accordingly, right? If we kind of get to this world, everyone will want to be at all areas at all times, right? Pretty much how things happen in the distributed world right now. So if you like applications start localized, and once they have a good amount of scale, they kind of want to be everywhere, and they use like things like Amazon Edge and software like that. So I think there is no one correct answer to this. It's very application specific, and the trade-off here is like synchronicity versus like capital efficiency, for example, right? And I think each application will kind of decide where they want to lie, and will be quite fun to kind of see applications decide different areas in the whole spectrum, and see how that thing kind of plays off. I think Osmosis particularly here has taken like a like a completely asynchronous approach, but very capital efficient, very liquidity aggregated. So it will be fun to kind of see how these designs kind of evolve from here.
Yeah, Yeah, Philip. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I agree with what Vaibhav said. And just to make an example here also here, like it's application specific needs that come into play here, right? A multi-chain lending protocol will want to have liquidity on multiple chains to borrow against. And then at the same time, it's facing that capital efficiency problem. So it needs the ability to share data and state and move assets around to rebalance the pools. So this is just a very complex question with no straightaway answer. There's nothing that should be or shouldn't be. And then also we can see each different use case in a specific context, right? So maybe there is a voting solution just for a particular set of companies. Also thinking about company ecosystem chains that we were going to see. Like let's say Visa is launching a chain for all their merchants, right? So we're going to have these cases that are there, and then maybe there's just one particular other chain they have to interoperate with, and it's going to be a totally different dynamic and solution for that.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of interesting use cases have still been have yet to be figured out yet. Yeah, for sure. And
I also would have to mirror this quite. I mean, as said, right, like the safe is more on the user side to some extent. I mean, also the developers are important. And you mentioned that it's more the distributed model right now where we copy paste code. But we can already see that while for some cases that it's nice and has advantages, but it has at least as many challenges that it brings up, right? Like, and it depends very much on the use case. And for many users, a model where they have something like a beacon chain from which out they can control the other chains, right? Like, would be way more natural because they don't have to think about really every chain specifically. But it's hard to say, is there one beacon chain? Like, which one should these be? Like, I mean, how Philipp said, right? Like, if there's suddenly a business that spins up their own chain, do they want to commit to that their beacon chain is Ethereum mainnet? Not sure if Visa would want to do this. Still, they would want to create interoperability, and this is really where this for us, like this, which one is the right model depends very much on the use case, and we like abstracting this away will be a very big challenge. And I mean, it starts with we first need to abstract away the protocols. If you can abstract it away on the like for the different protocols, then it becomes also for the user a little bit easier how to abstract this away and think about this. And yeah, and I mean, I liked how Philipp mentioned in the for the first question, right? Like under the hood, there's a lot of common, like we use arbitrary method bridges in different forms, and this I think evolving this will be very key to really enable these different use cases. And then I'm not sure if there's one right solution.
Yeah, definitely. I'm also been thinking like, have you guys been thinking about like more out of the use cases for Gnosis where like you can have like your main multi-sig wallet on Ethereum, but then actually have that wallet sign another deployment on another chain through GMP. So, do you think something like this would be possible, like in this new like distributed model where the coordinating chain would be on Ethereum, however, the deployments across the other chains are handled by GMP, like message passing using the bridges?
Yeah, so there has been a prototype actually by the Zodiac team, which was for the DAO focused tooling, right? Like where they really said, hey, we want to do the voting on a chain where it's like really feasible to do on-chain voting, which I mean, mainnet on-chain voting right now with a big DAO is kind of not feasible. But then you want to somehow transfer this vote over, right? Like, I mean, this is the current, like there's a safe snap, right, which integrates with Snapshot, but there you use an oracle, which means you have to trust this oracle. And if you say, hey, if you trusting a bridge is potentially or hopefully in the long run way more trustless than trusting one specific oracle. And I think the other way, if you want to think it also the other way around, is like theoretically it would be nice that you can use a mainnet or like the layer one safe to have it as a recoverer for all the other chains, right? Like it's nice you have some keys, you lose them on some layer two or sidechain, but that doesn't lose your funds because in the worst case you go back to layer one, you have a little bit more critical keys there and can recover the stuff back on the side chains. The challenge here is right like that if the user always thinks about hey same addresses everywhere, you have to like this is very tricky right now. If you use a factory, getting same addresses actually provides you more attack surface than it provides you any benefits, but the users are still like this is the only way how to really go forward. We need to have the same address everywhere, which makes it hard. I mean, Yeah, in the past I was a fan for this too, even with ENS having the same address, but actually it's not feasible, especially if you want to have more like with different implementations. Not good with pronunciation of this word.
Yeah.
So you don't want to have 100% homogeneous blockchain space, right? Like this is like it's okay, but it's not the future. I mean, we see it even with CPUs moving away from having all the same CPUs. We have different kind of
Yeah, one of the like things that we do, like we're doing a couple things to solve this in Cosmos. So one is like we use this Bec32 prefixing. It was like by, it was started by the Bitcoiners actually, but so every chain has a unique prefix at the beginning, and then there's also a nice checksums that it does as well. But at least then I can like see an address and I can like see it. Hey, this is clearly like an address for Osmosis versus Juno versus Stargaze. And so you don't act, there was obviously that situation that happened on the Optimism case where like, you just see an address and you don't know whether it was like, oh, was this an Ethereum address or an Optimism address? So that's a problem. And then we are actually building this thing called ICNS right now, interchain name service. It's kind of like ENS, but it uses like what we call the outpost model, which is I can actually get into the outpost model in a little bit, because I actually think that's where the direction of most cross-chain apps is going. But how ICNS works is that like the ownership of a name, let's say I own the name Sunny, it exists on one chain, but then I can set the resolution of different suffixes. So I can do sunny.osmo points to a specific Osmosis address, but I can do sunny.juno points to a Juno address, while sunny.stars points to a Stargaze address. And you set all the command center of this exists on the ICNS chain, but then it like, when you set a sunny.juno address, what it does is it sends that data over IBC and sets the resolution for the .juno on the Juno chain. And it's important to have the resolution of addresses happening locally to their domains, so that way contracts on that chain can actually make use of that, as well as it could be used as like a routing system. Because if a contract on Osmosis, it needs to send tokens to sunny.juno, it's like, I don't know who sunny.juno is, but I'm just going to IBC this to the Juno chain because I know this is a .juno address, and then I'm going to let the Juno chain figure out who to actually resolve and send this to. So that's kind of like, so this outpost, this is like an example of this outpost model that we see, which is this idea of like command centers existing on an app chain, but then they have these outposts on other chains. So another example of like a team in Cosmos that's building like along this outpost model is the Mars protocol, where they're like this lending protocol, but what they do is they have their own blockchain, the Mars chain, where people deposit assets. But what they've realized is, for a lending protocol to be useful, they need to be you need the borrowing capacity to be co-located with dexes, because what people want to do primarily is do these leverage loops, right? And you don't want you want this to happen synchronously and atomically as fast as possible. And so what Mars does is they deploy outposts. So sort of like on Osmosis or DYDX or Injective, all these many different dexes in the Cosmos ecosystem. And then the Mars protocol like looks at, hey, where is the demand for borrowing coming from? And they shift their liquidity to the outpost wherever the demand is coming from. So that way you can borrow synchronously a certain amount of assets. And then if you want to borrow more than that, that will happen asynchronously, because it will go pull it from other outposts or from the hub, from the Mars hub itself. So this outpost model is actually how I see, I've seen like, I helped the Mars team sort of design this model, and we've actually seen that a lot more projects in Cosmos are sort of following this outpost model now as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like we've also seen some projects that are building on layer 0 and Axelar right now, which are trying to create like different borrowing and lending in separate chains, but ultimately have one chain to do the coordination. So basically, for the user, it's basically like all the liquidity will be shared across all the platforms. So the user can collateralize their USDC on like BNB and then borrow some like a Matic from Polygon, just using the GMP and the state of which the different outposts is synced using a single like coordinating chain. Yeah, definitely one of the main use cases that we see how like cross-chain products will be built in the future. And yeah, and like just wanted to add, like, what do you guys think about the unbundle project? So basically, like, we've also been like brainstorming like different ways that these applications can use different blockchains to each of the abilities. So basically, in the Cosmos ecosystem, we were thinking that maybe on the Stars chain, which is like an NFT dedicated chain, like if people want to buy NFTs using like a USDC, but they don't have a DEX infrastructure, they could use like the DEX liquidity of Osmosis to do the purchases. So basically, for a user, it will only seem like the buying NFTs on Stars. However, like all the liquidity is actually routed through Osmosis.
Yeah, this is something that actually we are hopefully will have live by the end of the year. This ability for you to have assets on any Cosmos chain, at least Cosmosm enabled chain for now, and be able to like do it'll in a single transaction. What it will do is it'll IBC it to Osmosis, do the swap, IBC it back, and then finish executing whatever the rest of your transaction was. Because the goal is that we want to make this right now each of those steps requires a new transaction, a new click, new ledger sign from the user, and that kind of is not the UX that we really want. And so we're trying to we've basically added there's a couple of new things that came into the new protocols. So how IBC works is it's just like very bare bones like transport protocol that transports data, and what you do is on top of that you build application layer protocols. So you have the token transfer protocol, or there's a new one that came out that's been out for a couple months now, but it's kind of now starting to see production, is like interchain accounts, where it allows an account on one chain to make a transaction on a different chain because it sends the transaction data itself over IBC. And so this is sort of, by using this interchain account system, we're going to be able to achieve that kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely like very, very interesting use cases, and excited to always build out, try out all these projects myself personally as well. So yeah, in terms of like as like a middleware provider like Socket or LI.FI, what do you think you guys can fit into this distributed model or coordinating model where the liquidity is on different chains and like applications want to utilize the different parts of each blockchain or the liquidity?
Yeah, I think this is specifically due to the fact that liquidity is liquidity is fragmented across so many bridges. We see around 70 bridging projects out there. It's incredible, and we see more and more coming up. So I think Vaibhav will agree. Like, sorry, there are so many bridges in the pipeline that haven't even announced yet, and some have been announced and not be released yet. So there's more to come, and there's someone's venture capital behind that. That they're going to see traction to a certain extent. Who will then, in the end, win? If it's the one that takes it all, is a different question. But they're all going to pick their niche. We also see more and more bridges specializing for certain use cases and in certain environments. That's interesting. So the space is apparently big enough to pick your niche, even as a bridge. And as an aggregator, we simply are able to not let you think about this, neither you as a user nor as a developer. And in the best case, a chain or a project will be completely chain agnostic. I mean, if you use the internet, you don't care who's issuing the SSL certificate, right? You don't care about which tier network you're on right now. And in the same manner, you don't want to think about which bridge is being used underneath. And also, as an aggregator, we are simply able to provide fail safety. If a bridge gets hacked, if a bridge is drained out of liquidity, if anything happens, our smart routing is and our monitoring solutions in the back end are just smart enough to detect that very early on, and we simply fall back to alternative solutions. And this is something you as a developer by your own, you wouldn't be able to do that. It's just too much implementation overhead. And a huge issue these Kotlin products are facing and will face is these fast iteration cycles we are facing in that interoperability space. We are seeing these bridges reinventing themselves over and over again. We saw that with Synapse, we saw that with Bioeconomy, we saw that with Connect specifically. I think last year in April, the Connect was still on a state channel approach. In July, they released NXDP, which was on-chain and stateless, and now Amarok is coming, which is a really nice solution, but it's the third iteration within a year, right? So it speaks for the team that they stay completely flexible and don't fall in love with their own ideas and just like, okay, refactor. But these fast iteration cycles are making it hard for you to just rely on a specific solution. So having a dedicated team, third-party team that takes care of these things, makes decisions regarding that, because you then have to evaluate, right? Is the change too early, or when is the right point to make that change? Migration and switching costs are just high. And then again, super interesting to see projects like Herodotus and Lagrange with multi-chain state-proof solutions and all of that coming up. So this again will change. And then you as a developer have to make a decision. What's the right solution? Is the solution enough for now? What if I need another solution by tomorrow? And as the aggregator, we are solving all these issues for you. You get everything out of one API. Similar to what Stripe has done with all the payment processing back then, right? We do the very same thing for interoperability.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. So you're basically focusing on it's just too much for the developers and the users, like all the new interoperability solutions that are coming out. So your
Exactly.
goal is to aggregate and incorporate as many of them as possible. So Vaibhav, what about for Socket? Is it the same direction you guys are going, or is there more a more specific use case that you guys are trying to accomplish with the aggregation?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, to comment on the previous question about the unbundled model, I think it's quite an interesting model, honestly, and kind of aligns with my personal thinking about how the scaling space is going to evolve. Right now, we're in the model where everything lies on the same chain, and everyone wants atomic transactions, right? But all of us have collectively realized that's not the future. That's not how we are going to scale, right? And we're building these things called L2s, right? And the other end of this spectrum is everyone builds their own app chain, and everyone's asynchronously connected, right? But I think honestly, practically speaking, we're going to lie somewhere in the middle. I like to call this concept as state bubbles, right? So we'll have different state bubbles, and in these bubbles, all applications that need synchronous access to each other will lie. Everything else will move out, right? So if there are applications like Sunny mentioned that the bond and the dexes, they should stay together because people like to do those atomic leverage transactions, right? So these kind of functionalities which will kind of lie together in the same layer or same state bubble. And things like NFT marketplaces, NFT projects, or NFT heavy functionality, let's say, will lie on another layer, and an application will together, kind of reside on top of both of these, right? Where all the activity is routed to this NFT state bubble, all the DEX lending act is routed to this, let's say DeFi state bubble, right? Or synchronous DeFi state bubble. And there is this large coordination layer that's, kind of making all of this happen underneath the hood. And I think that's where Socket's trying to operate, right? Socket's trying to become this orchestration layer, or this market layer, where people just kind of deploy applications, and all of this orchestration happens underneath the hood, right? People don't have to worry about scaling. And I think one interesting and a funny observation, this is how Solana also scales, for example. Solana or Sui and things like that. They all scale by parallelization, right? And with L2s, we get parallelization, right? And we can, just as a thought experiment, if we try and think about what happens every contract on Ethereum L1 is not a contract, but an L2 in itself, right? We get to this model where all transactions are asynchronous, and we can have a coordination layer that kind of processes linked transactions together, and unlinked transactions separately. That was like a big leap in scalability. So I think like the whole unbundling thing is very exciting, and Socket kind of wants to operate on this coordination / orchestration layer.
Yeah, definitely. Very interesting use case as we're seeing different like just instead of relying on like a single chain for the orchestration, you guys can act as that orchestration layer. Yeah, definitely.
Just gonna shill CosmWasm here, where CosmWasm is this like smart contracting system that we have in Cosmos, and it's actually designed to do this like from the it was designed for this. So all so it uses a like actor based message passing system, and so all smart contract calls are like asynchronous by default. And so the kind of the beauty of this is what it actually lets you do is the act of calling a contract on the same chain is basically the same as calling a contract on a different chain. So, being able to do this sort of like, there was this idea in Ethereum called like yanking, which was like, oh, you can move contracts between shards and stuff. And so this is something that's actually very easy to do in the CosmWasm framework today.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing. Of course, like with all of our Cosmos designed to be interoperable, the main programming language is also designed.
Yeah, it's like a lot of the things, and like I think a lot of these interoperability solutions are being like tacked on in a lot of the EVM design world, while in Cosmos, like a lot of this stuff has been like being designed from the get-go. Like we designed CosmWasm to be asynchronous from the get-go because we knew our goal was we wanted cross-chain contracting and stuff. So I think the ability to write cross-chain applications in the Cosmos stack is just going to be like allow us to move a lot faster than I think other frameworks.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for sharing your view. Yeah, so in the interest of time, like I think let's move on to the final question. So basically, for now, like we can see that like for the cross-chain products, like there's a lot of pain points for the user in particular. So basically, like for me personally as a cross-chain user as well, like even to when using like DEX aggregators, like I have to sign multiple transactions, and then like so for EVM to AVM, if it's like EVM to like Solana or like Cosmos, I'll have to like sign the transaction, like switch my wallet to a different address because the address is non-EVM. So there's a lot of pain points there. And of course, like we've even seen like some projects like a StepN, which have released their NFT collections on two chains, so both Solana and BSC. And we're seeing that like because of the different liquidity in each of the different ecosystems, like the play to earn model and the prices of the NFTs are completely different across both chains. So there's a lot of like challenges even for different dApps right now when trying to implement cross chain. So the question is like, what do you think in the future, like what will it take for cross-chain products to be the standard, and then like what would it look like for the user in order for cross-chain products when they're like ready to take off? I think Richard, do you have any?
Yeah, I can start. I mean, I'm gonna go. It's also like top down since I will come again from the user side, right? Like, I mean, we have visited the tech side a couple of times, and I mean, I think a lot of things that need to change have been mentioned before in our session today. I mean, there were like right now bridges are still something where it's expensive, it's not fast, right? Like this needs to improve because only then also from the user side you can abstract it really away. As long as the user really, as you brought the examples, right? Like you have to think about different addresses and you know what these different addresses mean. So you have to think about so many things that don't make sense. I mean, Sunny described it quite nicely, right? Like with a interchain naming system where you don't want to think about it. It should be under the hood routing in a way that I mean ENS also working on this where they say, hey, you have this cross-chain resolution model, right? Like these need to be there, and you need to because these are the tools to abstract it away from the user, so that the user only on a very superficial level has to think about it. They not how they do it right now, where they're saying, oh, do I have to use a different wallet? Do I have to use a different signing key? Like that's not the level where they need to think about it. And only once we are able to abstract this away, then we can really achieve user adoption. But I mean, with what I would hand it up to the other people is before we can even achieve user adoption, I would go back to what Philipp mentioned before. We need to get developer adoption. We need to abstract it also away for the developers to some extent. And this is, I think, also quite a big challenge still.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for your views. What about Philip or Vaibhav? Do you have any opinions on like what's still needed for the user experience?
Plenty. I think we have mentioned most of this stuff, right? It's simply more security, better testedness. So we need to increase trust in these solutions. I think this is a major thing right now. It will take for sure 1-2 more years until we have achieved that. I think it simply takes time to get rid of so many bugs and small entrances. It's like financial systems; they took years to stabilize and be safe. And then, yeah, performance. Usability is still a key. Some bridges claim they are fast, but they're only fast as long as they are centralized. For example, Layer 0 right now is still a very centralized solution. They are decentralizable, but they are, as of fact, right now, centralized. And that makes them fast for now. Will it scale performance-wise once they start decentralizing? We're going to see. This is definitely something that has to change.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of the main hacks of it and bridges as well. So I can see the users' reluctance in using these solutions. But yeah, security is definitely one of the main things that we definitely need to still work on. Maybe Sunny, you can go first. Like, what are your thoughts on like the whole user experience?
Yeah, I think there needs to be like a little bit better like cross-chain coordination, like systems, almost like Instadapp of for cross-chain, right? Where like users don't. What users should be able to do is like it should be more declarative rather than imperative, right? In like programming, you imperative is you write out the steps of what you want to do, while declarative is more you say, hey, this is the result that I want, and you want the some sort of system that will go and like figure out what steps to do and execute and coordinate them, right? And so I think that, like, hey, if someone wants to open a 2x leverage position on X, or so instead of the user having to choose which bridge to use, where to get the lending protocol, then like where to bridge it, where to trade, do all this stuff, right? That should all be like coordinated away from the user. And like that, I think that's like sort of one of the next big cross-chain products that needs to be built. Otherwise, I think another thing that I think is very important is just on the security side of things. Like I think one of the big issues is a lot of people are just like, rightfully so, with the number of bridge hacks that have happened in the last 1 year, but just on the security of using bridged assets. And in my opinion, like, I think one of the biggest things that we could be doing to help like with bridge safety is like, or just the way to help with like any safety in like anything in blockchains is rate limits. So, one thing that Axelar has added recently is this idea of rate limiting, where they can say like, hey, only a maximum of 25% of our bridges TVL can like be like removed within every like 6-hour period or something like that. And so this is really nice because that way, if there is some sort of hack or something that gives time for, it caps the losses and gives time for human intervention. And this is how like systems work in traditional systems work as well, right? You always need circuit breakers in the system to deal with like extraneous black swan events. And so I think like we're working on adding similar sort of rate limiting systems into IBC, but I think like getting more bridges to add these sort of like security mechanisms will help ease people's like confidence in using these cross-chain protocols.
Yeah, definitely. Like even in the traditional finance world, like as you mentioned, the circuit breakers for some of the like unforeseen stock events, and even like some banks, like they won't allow you to withdraw like all your funds like in a single day, like what you can do on DeFi. So definitely like these things are still necessary as well. Vaibhav, are you back?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of answering the same question. I think one big problem that I still kind of I'm trying to find answers to is how to make. So right now, every user or every developer in the in the whole ecosystem is kind of used to synchronicity, right? So bridging is inherently a very anxiety driving process, right? You send your funds to this random smart contract on one chain, and you pray to the Lord that you get those funds on the other chain, right? This is like a very small example for asynchronous communication, right? It
Yeah.
induces so much anxiety that it's actually taking like a big toll on the user front, right? So I think kind of applications that try to handle or like try to process like let's say cross-chain payment transfers as quickly as possible, even by taking on a little bit of LP risk. I think those are like a big win for the ecosystem, and they can settle amongst themselves slowly later on, right? I think things like Hop and Connects are and even Across are kind of building such kind of systems for cross-chain transfers, and I think these are like a big UX win for the end user. So I think generally all kind of cross-chain applications, we will kind of try to hit interesting trade-offs there that users like, and kind of take security to another layer, build a more UX friendly application for the users, take on security for the and allow LPs to take a hit, things like that. I think those kind of applications are going to be really interesting, and really kind of looking forward to kind of this whole ecosystem evolve in that sense.
Yeah, definitely. As you mentioned, the asynchronous part, like having to wait for the other chain to confirm your transactions, definitely a hairy part in the cross-chain experience for now. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for this panel, and it's very great to hear everyone's thoughts on the cross-chain experience. I personally have been doing a lot of research into the space as well, and yeah, a lot of new ideas that you guys have given me to think about as well. And so yeah, just to close off the panel, like we think that like in the future, like cross-chain experiences will be totally abstracted away from the user. Like users won't have to like worry about like what chain they're operating on, and like there'll be like a single like managed wallet or like even a single address for or domain for all the chains, which can be seamlessly used by the user. And yeah, we also think that like dApps will have their own like sovereign chains. Where we've been seeing like thoughts of like Uniswap becoming their own chain through the Uni chain, and then like there'll be like seamless interoperability within all these chains, as Vaibhav mentioned with the synchronous computing. And yeah, definitely the cross chain is definitely the way that we think Web3 is going. So yeah, thank you very much for this talk, everyone.
Thank you so much, guys.